Okay, we begin today in the Mishnah Kuf Mem Ches Amud Beis. Zok the Mishnah. Meine Adam es Erchav. A person could count his guest, his parparoisav, and the delicacies that he's serving. Mipiv, only by mouth. Avaloy men aksav. He shouldn't have it written on a paper and read from the paper, who are my guests, where are my guests, and to make sure that he has all his guests invited. Or the same thing also with the food that's being served for them. He shouldn't be reading from a paper that he wrote on it from before Shabbos. We'll see, the Gemara will explain why not, what the pshat in this is. Mafis Adam Imbanov. A person could make a geidel. He casts a lot for the people, for his children, Vim Bnei Beisai, the people of his house, ala shulchan, that are sitting by his table. If you're casting a lot just to give out the food for everybody, and everyone's getting basically an equal amount of food, so there's no winner and loser. Elamai, I don't know, some might want this, some might want that, so you're giving the same money for everybody, so then you can make a geidel. But if there's a winner and a loser, someone gets a large portion, someone gets a smaller portion, then you don't make this geidel on Shabbos. Umatilin chaloshin, you're allowed to throw these geidelis. Chaloshin, as we'll see in the Gemara, is another expression that's used for a geidel. Ala kachim be yomtiv, regarding the kachim on yomtiv, that the kohanim eat from the kachim. Avaloy ala monis, not regarding the portions. It'll be explained in the Gemara, as we'll see. So the Gemara Kuf Mem Tes begins with explaining the pshat in this thing, that a person is counting his guests or counting the delicacies that he's serving. Should only be counting it by mouth, and he should not be counting it with a document or paper that he wrote down before. My time, what's the reason for this gzeira? Rav Bivi Omar, gzeira shemi yimchok. The gzeira here is that if he's reading from a paper, so then he may come to erase something that he wrote. When he sees that there's a certain guest that he doesn't have enough food for them, there's someone that he decides he doesn't want to invite, so he might want to erase him from the list. Abaya says that's not the reason. Rather, the reason is gzeire shami yikra b'shtari adyotis. He might come to read shtari adyotis. He might come to read documents that are business-related documents. We had this gzeire before. The Gemara says on Shabbos you're not allowed to read shtari adyotis, any business dealings, all kinds of things. There's various different interpretations in Rishonim what exactly is included in shtari adyotis. But it definitely includes all kinds of business dealings and all kinds of documents of what you borrowed and the money you owe and things like that. You're not allowed to read them on Shabbos. So they made a gzeira not to write down and read these things over here as well regarding your guest list, not to come to read Shtari Adyotis on Shabbos. My beinayo, what's the difference between these two reasons? Ike beinayo, the difference would be the kosav akaisel. He has his guest list written on the wall, umidli. It's written high up on the wall. He has it a place written high up on the wall. So now the question is he allowed to read that guest list from that place? If the issue is that he's going to erase it, we're not afraid that he's going to come to erase it. It's written in a place that's high up, that you can't reach to erase it easily. But according to the opinion that says that by reading this, he might come to read other things. He might come to read business things and shtari adyotis, chashinon, we still have that concern. That's the nafkamina. Frag the Gemara, according to Rav Bivi, that says that the gzeira here is that he might come to erase this list. Why does he not hold of this concern that by reading your list, your guest list, he also might come to read other documents, he might come to read shtari adyotis and Shabbos? So another question here is, L'shema yimchoik loichashinon? Are you going to tell me that in a case where you wrote it high up on the wall and it's not so easy to reach to erase, are you going to say that in such a case we're not concerned that he's going to erase it and therefore it's going to be allowed? Vatanya, we learned in a different braisa regarding a different subject as follows. Lo yikra lo oira ner. You're not allowed on Shabbos to read to the light of a lamp, because you might come to tamper with the flame to fix it, that it should burn properly, you should get the light properly. V'amar Rabba, we learned this before, Rabba says, even if that lamp is high up, so high that it's like 2 stories high, and even if it's so high like the measurement of 2 ox goads, which is a certain measurement that they had then, and even if it's that height, or even if the source of this light comes from a lamp that's so high, like 10 stories above him, Nevertheless, lo yikra. He shouldn't read from the light of this lamp. So what do we see over here? This is one of the sources where we see the concept that's known as loy plug. Once Chachamim make a takana that you shouldn't do something, and it's with a specific concern that you might come to do something, it doesn't matter. Even when that concern does not apply, like over here, you might tamper with the light, but when it's so high, there's no concern you're going to tamper with the light. Nevertheless, loy plug, the gzeira is still in place. So over here, the same thing should be true. If the gzeira is that you might come to erase your writing, even when it's written in a place that you're not going to come to erase it, nevertheless, the gzeira should still apply. So this can't be the difference between Rav Bivi and Abaya when you wrote it high up in a place that it's hard to erase. Elo says the Gemara, Ikke benayu, the difference between them would be the opposite. The Kosav HaKaisel Mitzi. You wrote it on a wall, but you wrote it lower down. Lamanda Mashem Yimchoik, the opinion that says that you might come to erase part of your guest list. Chayshinon, we're afraid that because you wrote it in the place where you could erase it, you might erase it. Truth is, according to this mandama, as the Gemara just said, whether it was high up, whether it was low down, that gzeira would still be in place. Taisus points this out. It wasn't necessary for the Gemara to say that it was low down. Lamandam Hashema Yikra, according to the opinion that says that by reading your guest list, you might come to read other documents, study at Yaitis, Loi Chashinon. We're not chayshish in such a case. Why not? Guda b'shtara loi michlaf. Reading something off the wall is not something that a person would forget in exchange with reading documents. So there's no gzeira that you're going to come to read a document. So in this case, Abaye would be makel and say that it's allowed. So now the Gemara asks the question the other way around. Ulaman dama shema yikra. According to Abaye, that says that the reason is that you might come to read Shtari Yadiyatis. Leicha shema yimchak. Why is he not concerned of the fact that a person reading his writing, his guest list on Shabbos, might come to erase one of the guests of the list? Ella says the Gemara, Ikke benayo. So the Gemara now tries a third difference, a third nafkamina between Rav Bivi and Abaya. The Chayik atavle apinkis, a case where the person engraved the names of his guests into a tablet or a board. So over here, the Gemara explains that there would be a nafkamina. The opinion that says that we're concerned that he might erase a name from the list. We're not concerned. It's engraved. It's very difficult to erase. So he's going to remember. He's not going to erase this on Shabbos. The opinion that says that you shouldn't read from it because you might come to read Shtari Adyatis. Chayshinan. If you're reading from this guest list, you also might come to read other documents. So we are concerned. Frek the Gemara still persists again and says, Rav Bivi that says the gzeira is that you might come to erase the names. Lema leichash shema yikra. Why is he not concerned with the fact that you might come to read Shtari Adyatis? Now if you're going to argue and say, Tavle upinkis b'shtare loy mechlaf. Similar to what we said before, if you have writing on a wall and you're reading from a wall, people do not exchange reading from the wall with reading documents. Maybe you could say the same thing. People do not exchange reading from a tablet or reading from a board with reading a document on a piece of paper. So therefore, there's no gzeira in that case. But the Gemara says it's not true. Vatanya, we learned in a Braisa, a person can be counting on Shabbos' guests, and he's counting how many guests are going to sit in the inside room, how many guests are going to be sitting in the outside room. And he also makes a cheshbon, he counts what exactly are the amount of portions that he's going to be serving them. But he could only read it miksav shal gabi akaisel. If he's going to be reading it on the writing, it's only from a writing on the wall. Avaloi miksav shal gabi tavlo pinkis. He should not read if he wrote it on a tablet or a board. So we see that writing it on a tablet and a board, reading it from there is a problem. So the Gemara now explains, hey chidami, what are we talking about over here? If you're going to say the case over here is that he wrote it with ink, he wrote it regularly, he wrote it onto a board or on a tablet. So why are we saying what difference is there if he wrote it on the wall or if he wrote it on a tablet? Either way, if you wrote it, there should be a concern that you will come to erase it by reading it and noticing that there's a mistake you made, one guest you don't want to come, or something you planned on serving you're not going to be serving. Either way, he might come to erase it. What difference does it make if he wrote it on a wall or he wrote it on a tablet? Elolav, so Elamai, what's the pshat over here? The chayik. He engraved it on the tablet. The ketani, and what does it say? Miksav shal gabi akaisel. If you engraved it on the wall, so then it's not a problem. Avol miksav shal gabi tavlo pinkis. But if you write it on a board or a tablet, then you're not allowed. Why? Because when you write it on a tablet, if you read that, you might come to read Shtari Adyatis. You might come to read other documents. So I see from here that writing it on a tablet cannot be used as an afgemina between Rav Bivi and Abaye. Either way, there's an issue. Whether you write it on, whether the reason is that you might come to erase it on a tablet, you might come to erase it. If the issue is that you might come to read it, you also might come to read other. Shtari Hadyatis. So that can't be the nafkamina. Okay. Again, let me clarify that. If you wrote it on a tablet, there's actually no concern that you're going to come to erase it because you engraved it. We're talking about over here of a case that a person that engraved it, engraving, we're not concerned he's going to erase it because it's hard to erase. He's going to remember before he erases it. But there definitely should be a concern that if he's reading off a tablet, that he's going to read other Shtari Adyatis, he'll read other documents. And that should be a concern, l'kula alma. The Gemara's question is, why would there be an argument about that? Shouldn't everybody agree that he's going to come to read from other documents? Ella, so after all of this, the Gemara goes back to the original pshat that we said before. Ella la'olam, the kosav, akaisel umidli. The case over here is that he wrote it on a wall and it's higher up. So as Rashi explains the pshat in the Gemara over here, after the whole discussion we had over here, the emes is that when a person writes something on the wall, a person does not confuse what's written on the wall to a document that he's writing on a piece of paper. So really, there's no reason to be concerned that if you read something from a wall, that the person would come to read a document. And the same thing also, if a person is engraving something, we're not afraid that he's going to come to erase it, because if it's engraved, we're not afraid that he's going to erase it. And over here, in this case, the Gemara is saying now that he wrote it on a wall very high up. There's really no concern that he's going to erase it. It's very high up. But still, there's a machlokes here between Rav Bivi and Abaye. What's the machlokes? And your question was, the Rabbi told us that once you make a gzeira, even in a case where the gzeira does not apply, the gzeira is left in place. This is the concept of loy plug, as we had before regarding the lamp. The Rabbi Tanoihi, this chiddush of Rabbi, that even when the gzeira does not apply, the gzeira remains in place, that's actually a machlokes Tanoim. The Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Meina Adam es Orchav es Parpareisav mipiv. A person could be counting his guest and the food that he's going to be serving by mouth, but he should not read it from a ksav. He shouldn't read it from a paper. Rav Acha allows to read it from something that you wrote. If it's miksav shal gabi akaisel, if you wrote it on the wall, then Rav Acha allows it. Hey chidami. So now when Rav Acha said it's allowed, what case was Rav Acha speaking about? If you're going to say it's written on the wall lower down, there should be a concern that he's going to erase it. Why would Rav Acha argue with the Tanakama? Why shouldn't you be allowed to read it from the... Why should you be allowed to read it if it's lower down on the wall in a place where it's easy to erase? El alav de kosav umidli. The case over here is he wrote it on the wall, he wrote it higher up in a place that it's not so easy to erase. So here's the machlokes between Rav Acha and the Tanakama, whether we're going to make the gzeira in such a case that the person is going, even though there's no actual ability for the person to erase it, do we still keep the gzeira in place?
Yeah, but if he wrote it higher up, he can also go up.
Correct. True, but it's not easy to get there, and therefore we're not choishish that he's going to go erase it. When he wrote it, he had a ladder and he was able to go up there and erase it. For him to write it, for him not to go and erase it, he's going to have to go and get that ladder and climb up there. Now he doesn't have that ladder, or he's going to have to go and get that ladder. So therefore, Rav Acha says the gzeira doesn't apply in this case. So we see over here in this braise that it's clearly a machlokes tanoim, whether we make the gzeira even in a case where the reason for the gzeira doesn't apply, whether this inyan of loy plug, whether we use this concept of loy plug over here or not. So therefore, the same machlokes applies over here between Rav Bivi and Abaye as well. Rav Bivi said gzeira shema yimchoik, even when it's written high up, because Rav Bivi held that we always apply the gzeira that he might erase it, even in a case where he can't actually erase it, like Rabba. And Abaye said gzeira shema yikra b'shtari adyaitis, because Abaye holds that no. That is in certain cases where it's high up and you can't apply it, so the gzeira doesn't apply. We don't say the concept of loy plug. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Now the Gemara brings another case. So Shmami no de Rabbe Tanoihi. So we see that with the statement of Rabbe of loy plug is a machlokes Tanoim Shmami no. We see that point here. The Gemara brings another example where we see this concept of loy plug, whether we say that once Chachamim made a gzeira, that they keep it in place even when the reason of the gzeira doesn't apply. So that's a machlokes Tanoim. V'hani Tanoi, the argument over here amongst these Tanoim, kahani Tanoi, is also a machlokes of other Tanoim as well. The Tanya we learned in Abraisa. Before I go weiter, let me just conclude the Gemara that we learned before, benegay to not reading off a writing. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch brings that today we're not makpid on this. The Alter Rebbe there is malamet chus. Why today we're not makpid on this? The Alter Rebbe over there actually says, for example, you have a gabbai in a shul and he has aliyahs that he has to give out, and he has written before the list of the aliyahs that he has to give out. He says we're not makpid on this today, and he gives over there a limut chus. I'm trying to remember another reason. I saw this yesterday. The Alter Rebbe explains it's brought in the Paiskim already. The Ramah, I think, or the Magen Avram, that says that today we read even from a ksav.
Now with that, people they put paper clips of how much people
Paper clips. Okay, so paper clips is it's written from before, and you're just making a siman how much. But I'm talking about actually reading off a list of giving out aliyahs, or maybe even a list of a menu as well, and things like that. Mishaberach, that's what I'm talking about exactly. So the Alter Rebbe says we're not makbid on this today. Sagt the Gemara weiter, v'hani tanoi, kahani tanoi. So today, you have other Amiroim or other Tanoim that hold like the previous Tanoim. The Tanya, we learned in the Braise as follows. Ein roim b'mara b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to look into a mirror on Shabbos. It's the opinion of the Tanakama. Rab Meir matter. Rab Meir says it's allowed. When? B'mara hakavua b'kaisel. If the mirror is affixed to the wall, then it's allowed. So the Gemara first wants to understand what the pshat in this machlokes here is. Ma'ishna kavua b'kaisel. What's the reason why Rab Meir says that it's allowed if it's in the wall, if it's fixed to the wall? The ad the hachi v'hachi mitkar. So the basis of this isra to look into the mirror is that if a person looks into the mirror and he notices that there's a hair that's too long that he wants to cut off, he might come to cut off a hair on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, so then why is Rab Meir matter to look into a mirror that's fixed to the wall? Because you have the mirror fixed into the wall in one place and you notice a hair, and then you're going to have to walk and get your scissor to be able to cut off that hair. You walk and you come back. By the time you walk and come back, you remember it's Shabbos and you won't come to cut that hair. Frag the Gemara, if so, she'ene kavua nami, shouldn't we apply similarly regarding a mirror that's not fixed to the wall? Ad hachi v'hachi mitkar. Until he gets a scissor and he's going to cut off the hair, he'll remember that it's Shabbos. Even if it's true that mirror, he doesn't necessarily have it in one location, so it might not be such a long distance to go and get his scissor to cut off his hair, but still, shouldn't it be enough of a time for a person to remember not to cut off his hair on Shabbos? So what's the basis of the machlokes here? So the Gemara, no, there's a different pshat. It's not about the fact that he has time to remember. The pshat of the machlokes here is b'mara shel matches askinan. We're talking about a mirror that's made of metal, that has a sharp end. The Omer of Nachman Omer Rabba Baravua, mipnei ma omru mara shel matches asurin. Why are you not allowed to look into a mirror that's made from metal that has a sharp end? Mipnei she'adam asui lahasher ba nimen amaduldalim. Because the person might take the very mirror itself and use certain hairs that are hanging out that he doesn't want and cut it off with this mirror itself. If it's a sharp thing, so you could use the mirror itself, so he doesn't even have to go and get any other scissor. That's why it's not allowed. So what was Rab Meir saying? Rab Meir was saying, but if that metal mirror is affixed into the wall, so he can't use the metal itself to cut off any hairs. So therefore it's allowed. So here we see, what does the Tanakama hold? Even though it's fixed into the wall, and the person can't move it, and he won't be able to cut off hairs with it, nevertheless, loy plug. We don't make a distinction in the Gzeira. The Gzeira still applies. So here we see another example where there's a machlokes between the Tanakama and Rab Meir, whether we apply the concept of loy plug. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in another Braisa as follows. We're going back to the point of not reading writings on Shabbos. Ksav hamahalach. Tachas atzura, when you have writings under a picture that was made, like some kind of a caption under a picture. Betachas ad yuknois, under other forms of faces and things that a person drew. Asel lekreisa b'Shabbos. This is also part of the Gzeira that you're not allowed to read on Shabbos in order not to erase or not to come to reach Dari Adyetis, the reasons that we said before. Then the Braisa adds yukna atzma, and forms, seeing pictures of forms of faces. Af b'chayil asal istakalba. Even during the week, you're not allowed to look at this. Mishum shenemar al tifnu alilim. Do not look to alilim, which refers to avodah zarah. My Talmud. What's the pshat of this limud? Do not look to avodah zarah, and therefore you're not allowed to look at faces. Amar Rab Chanin al tifnu el midaitchem. Do not look at these forms that people make with their own imagination. This is something that you shouldn't look at. So the Gemara over here is saying that you're not allowed to look at forms of faces that people are drawing. So there's a machlokes Rishayim about this. Some Rishayim say that this refers to any form of a face you shouldn't be looking at, but it only refers to when you gaze in it, not when you see it, b'derech havara, not when you look at it. That's one opinion Rishayim. However, Taisvis and the Rosh and the Psak Din, it says over here is that this only refers to faces that are made l'shem avodah zarah. But if it's not made for beauty's sake, any face that's drawn for beauty's sake, you're allowed to look at it. It's not a problem. Huh? Any paintings, yeah, correct. It's not a problem at all.
It's not why I would say faces. You're not allowed to even stock up to anything in Avodah Zarah.
Specifically avodah zarah. Okay, it's a good question. Right.
Oh, it's Surah.
The first thing is Surah.
V'dyukna atzma, and then it says v'dyukna. V'dyukna atzma af b'chayil aser, right? Because it's made for avodah zarah. Yeah. Okay, so Taisus says it only goes on avodah zarah. Taisus brings a raya from the Gemara avodah zarah for this. Okay. Zok the Gemara, the next thing in the Mishnah was benegay to making a geirel on Shabbos. Mafis adam im bana v'chulu. You can make a geirel with your children, with the people by your table on Shabbos. Right? But so the Gemara now is medayik. Im banav v'im bnei beisai in. You're allowed to make a geirel for your children or for the people by your table. But v'im acher loy, to make a geirel for other people, you're not allowed to make a geirel on Shabbos. Why not? What's the issue of making a geirel on Shabbos? Which is something which is very practical. A lot of times you have children's programs and you want to make a geirel to give out a prize. Even if you're giving out the prize after Shabbos, you're not allowed to make a geirel on Shabbos. As we see right here. My time, what's the reason? K'd Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, Da'amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, b'nei chabura hamakpidim zel zeh. You have people of a group that are particular one with the other, and they share things, or they're exchanging things. Oivre mishum mida. They could transgress the Isser on Shabbos of not measuring things. On Shabbos, you're not supposed to measure things to size because it's uvn d'chayil, it's mundane activity. And the same thing, mishum mishkal, to weigh things, mishum minyan, to count things out. When you're giving things out and you're counting out a specific amount of how much you're giving, I'm giving you 100 for $1, 40 for $1, 30. If you're counting out a certain amount, you're not supposed to count. Mishum loivim v'peirin. Like we learned, this is the beginning of this pedic, it says you're not allowed to borrow and lend things, the yontiv on yontiv. So if you have people that are stam in a group and they're eating together and they're sharing and they're not particular, so then they share with one another. They're not counting, they're not weighing, they're not measuring. But if they are particular, so then this is not allowed in yontiv.
They get out these coupons and then the kids buy.
Yeah, it's not. Okay. I don't know. It's not making a geirel mamish. We're talking over here about making a geirel. So the Gemara says by bnei chabura that are makpidim zel zeh, there's this issue, and the same thing also when you make a geirel and you're giving out based on the geirel, a larger size, a smaller size, you get bigger, you get smaller, so you end up weighing, measuring, counting. So this could be an issue, and also there's another issue. B'chlal benegay, now is going back over here to the groups of people that are sharing with each other and they're sort of borrowing and lending from each other the food. So there's another issue, and that is the kedivrei Hillel. Hillel says af mishum ribis. There can be an issue of ribis, which was in the blat before. The Gemara there says that if you lend a loaf of bread and it has one value today, and you pay back the same loaf of bread tomorrow, and tomorrow the value of the loaf of bread goes up, so it's ribis. You're paying back more than what you borrowed. That's the pshat in our Mishnah. That's why you don't make this geirel on Shabbos. Frek the Gemara. So ihachi banav b'nei beisai nami. So this gezerah should apply even for the people of your own household, your own children and people by your table as well. If they're particular, so then you should have this issue of making this geirel on Shabbos. And for the Gemara, banav b'nei beisai haina time. The reason why with your own children, with the people by your table, this is not an issue. Kid Rav Yehuda Amarav, Da'amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, mutter lahalvais banav b'nei beisai b'ribis. You're allowed to lend money to your children, to the people in your own family with ribis. And why is a person doing this? Kedei lat iman tam ribis. If you want to educate them, you want to show them and give them a taste of ribis, to feel what it means that you borrow one amount and you have to pay back more. So for educational purposes, you're allowed to lend with ribis to the people of your house. What's the reason? So Rashi explains the reason is because it's really all your money. You're just doing it for educational purposes. The people of your family, you're supporting them. Whatever you're giving them is your money. So you're not really lending it to anybody, and they're not really paying it back to anybody. It's all within your pocket. So the same thing over here regarding what it says in the Mishnah. You're making a geirel, you're giving to one amount, to one another amount. There's no issue of you coming to measure it and to count it and whatever, because you're not really giving it away, you're not lending it, you're not getting anything back. It's all yours. It's all within your own family. So therefore it's not an issue at all. Frakte Gemara, so if that's the case, if so, ihachi mana gedaila keneged mana ketana. If you have a large portion that you give one person in a geirel against the smaller portion for the loser, that he gets a smaller portion, this also shouldn't be a problem. Why? What did it say in the Mishnah? Within your own family, you can make a geirel, but not if it's a larger portion against a smaller portion. What's the difference? Why should that be a problem? So the Gemara says, you're right. En achanami, that's true. V'chsure mechsere, there's missing in the Mishnah, and v'hachi katani. This is how you have to learn the Mishnah. Mafis adam and banavim nebeisel shulchan. A person can make a geirel with the people, with his household, by his table. Afilam mana gedaila keneged mana katana. Including if you're making a geirel where you're giving a larger portion for the winner and a smaller portion for the loser. My timer, what's the reason? Kid Rav Yuda Amarav, as we quoted before, Rav Yuda Amarav, because you're not giving it away to anybody. It's all part of your own pocket. It's all part of the people in your family that you're supporting. In Banavim Bnei Beisayin, but now we're medayik from the Mishnah. It's all for the people from your own family. But in Machedim, loy. But to make a geirel and you give a larger portion to the winner and a smaller portion for the loser, that's not allowed. What's the reason? Why is it not allowed? Kid Rav Yuda Mashmul. This is according to Rav Yuda Mashmul that we said before, because you come to measure, you come to count, you come to weigh, so therefore it's not allowed. Now the Gemara adds, Mana gedaila keneged mana ketana. When you make this raffle, you make this geirel, and you give the loser a smaller portion and the winner a larger portion, af b'chayil, even during the week, la'achedim, if it's for others, not in your family, aser. You're never allowed to make this raffle. Why not? My time, the reason is mishum kubya, because this is gambling. Gambling is something Rashi says is aser because of gzeila. Because when people are gambling, they're never expecting to lose. They want to win. And when you lose and you give away a larger portion for someone else, you don't really give it away willingly. You're upset that you didn't get it. So therefore it's me'ain, even though there's an agreement, this is the game, it's a gambling, whatever, but it's me'ain gzeila, it's also because it's similar to gzeila. So therefore this shouldn't be done, gambling even during the week. Okay, the next thing that it said in the Mishnah was B'nigeya to. Yeah, that's before. The Gemara brought up ribis. And chanami, correct. That's true. The Gemara before brought ribis, it's even during the week, yeah. The Gemara now goes to the next thing of the Mishnah, which was talking about the Kayanim. The Kayanim also make a geirel. Matilin, Chaloshin, Al, V'chulu. The Kayanim could make the geirel for their portions, for their kachim, but it said loy ala monois, not on their portions. What does this mean? My loy ala monois. What does it mean that they don't make a geirel for their portions? If you said that they make a geirel for the kachim, so what does it mean but they don't make a geirel for the portions? Rav Yaakov Rede Bas Yaakov, loy ala monois means loy ala monois shel choil b'yomtiv. They can make a geirel for the karbanis of the day of Yom Tov itself, because they couldn't make the geirel before. But if you have the portions from yesterday, you don't make the geirel on Shabbos for the portions of yesterday. Frek the Gemara pshita. This is obvious. If you could have made it yesterday, so then why should you make a geirel on Yom Tov for something that could have been made yesterday? Answers the Gemara, Ma'od the Tema, I would think that this is something that's very necessary to make on Yom Tov. Hoyel ksiv, since it says over there about the Kayanim, v'amcha kimirive Kayan. Your nation is like the Kayanim that quarrel with each other. They fight with each other. So they have a nature of getting into these arguments and fights over their portions of the kachim. So I would think you would allow them to make a geirel even for the portions during the week as well. Kamash Malon. So therefore the Mishnah teaches me that they can't make the geirel for the portions of during the week. Rav Yaakov, the daughter of the son of Yaakov, said something else. This is a completely different subject, which the Gemara brings. It was said by the same person. If somebody, his friend, is punished through him, what does this mean? Let's say you were a victim from somebody. Somebody did you something wrong. And now you daven to the Eibishter that the Eibishter should punish this individual. So he rightfully deserves that punishment. But if you're the cause of your friend being punished, so then Ein machnisen oisai b'mechitzasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you, this person, will also not be allowed within the Eibishter's mechitza, within the Eibishter's presence, even though the other person deserved the punishment. But if you're the one that causes the other person should be punished, the Eibishter doesn't want you to be within his presence. Minalan. Where do we see this from? If you're going to say, you see this from a story that it says regarding Achav. Achav was a king that was a Rasha. One of the things that Achav did was, there was an individual by the name of Navais. And Navais had a beautiful vineyard, and Achav wanted to have the vineyard. So what did Achav do? He orchestrated Navais to be killed, and then he took his vineyard. So the pasuk there says as follows: the Chsiv Vayomer Hashem. The Eibishter says, Mi yiftes Achav. Who's going to go and persuade Achav v'yal v'yipol b'Ramas Gilad? He should go out into a battle in Ramas Gilad, and there he'll fall in the battle. He'll die in the battle. Vayomer ze b'koi v'ze omer b'koi. There were different spirits that came and responded to the Eibishter with different ideas. Vayetze ruach, and one spirit came out, and as the Gemara will say, this was the spirit of Nevais. And he said, Vayamed lefnei Hashem, and he stood in front of the Eibishter, Vayomer ani afatenu v'gomer. I will go and appear to Achav and persuade him to go out into battle to be killed. Vayomer eitze v'hayisi ruach sheker b'fi kol neviov vayomer tifte, and I will go and convince him to go out. V'gam tuchal, and I'll tell him you'll be able to be victorious. Say, go out into battle. V'asei kain, and go into the battle, and he'll get killed. Who was this spirit that's speaking to the Eibishter that I'll go and speak to Achav? V'amrina mai ruach. Who was this spirit? Rabbi Yechanan zeruche shel Nevais. This was the ruach of Nevais. He wanted to take revenge of Achav that killed him, so he wanted to go and persuade Achav to go out into battle and to be killed. Or might say, the pasuk there says, "Say va'asei kain." The Eibishter tells him, "Go out and do this." Amar Rav says, "Tzei mechitzasi." The Eibishter says, "If you're going to do this, go out from my mechitza, go out from my presence." So what do you see over here? Even though what this spirit of Nevais is doing is something that Achav deserved. Achav killed him. And now he wants to take Nekama, he wants to make that cause that Achav should be killed. Nevertheless, if you're going to cause this, says the Eibishter, you leave my presence. So here we see that if you cause a punishment for someone else, even in a case where the other person deserves it, you yourself have to leave the Eibishter's presence. Fragt the Gemara, no, this is not a raya. The reason why the Eibishter wants him to leave his presence, it's another thing. Because it says there, if you speak falsehood, if you speak lies, so then you can't stand in the Eibishter's presence. Over there, he's going to go tell Achav a prophecy which is a lie, that he's going to be victorious in the battle, and really he's going to die in the battle. So maybe over there, the reason why he has to leave the Eibishter's presence is because of the lie. Ela mahacha, there's another raya. This is a raya from Nebuchadnezzar. This is a very despicable story about Nebuchadnezzar, where he had a very terrible custom. The Gemara is going to bring up the whole story soon. Nebuchadnezzar had a custom that he would seduce all the different kings and all the different prominent individuals that were under his rulership to come and have relations with him, Mishkav Zachar, to have different male kings to have relations with him. He would make big parties and then he would have relations with them. And so one of the cases over here was with Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, he wanted to also seduce him into having this kind of relations. So what does it say in the pasuk about this? Where am I over here? Ela mahacha. So what do we see in the pasuk? It says the Eibishter didn't allow him to do this to Tzidkiyahu. What does it say? Savata kolain. Instead, you became very, very embarrassed. Mikavoid, instead of having honor. The Gemara soon will say the story of what happened. And therefore it says, Shesei gam ata v'he'orel. You should drink v'ha'orel. What does this mean? V'ha'orel. So the Gemara Taisha, Savata koloi mikavoid. Who is it referring to when it says that you got all the disgrace instead of honor? Zen Nebuchadnezzar. This refers to Nebuchadnezzar. Shesei gam ata v'ha'orel, and you should drink. And also the orel. Who's this orel referring to? The uncircumcised one. Zet Tzidkiya. This refers to Tzidkiya. The pasuk here refers to Tzidkiya as an orel. Why? Because Tzidkiya brought about that Nebuchadnezzar was punished. As we'll see soon, Nebuchadnezzar himself was punished and got very embarrassed in this case. So therefore, Tzidkiya himself is referred to as an orel. What do we see from this? Even though Nebuchadnezzar deserved this punishment, but yet because Tzidkiya brought about this punishment on Nebuchadnezzar, he himself is referred to as an orel. So therefore, I see that if you cause somebody else to be punished, you yourself are removed from the Eibish's presence. So much so that in this case, Tzidkiya is referred to as a Adel. That's the source where we see this concept. So the Gemara does not accept this. Frek the Gemara. Chade, one question on this. The Kulikra b'Nebuchadnezzar ksiv. This entire pasuk is talking about Nebuchadnezzar. It's not talking about Tzidkiya. The way to read this pasuk is not veha orel, that Tzidkiya is the orel, vehei orel. That's how you're supposed to read this pasuk, meaning that Nebuchadnezzar became an orel. The Gemara will soon explain what that means. Nebuchadnezzar, his foreskin, the orel, we'll see soon. The Gemara will explain it. So it's not talking about Tzidkiya at all. So you can't dash in the pasuk this way. That's one question. Another question is va'oid Tzidkiya tzadika my havalela mevedle. What should Tzidkiya the tzaddik do? It's not something that was his fault. Nebuchadnezzar was forcing him into this, and the Eibishter is the one that made this nest and saved Tzidkiya from this. Tzidkiya didn't do anything for this, so why should he be punished for this? It was not his fault at all, and he didn't do anything for this at all. So the Gemara. So now the Gemara brings over here the story. When this Rasha wanted to go and seduce Tzidkiya into this relationship with him, so v'chulu, the Eibishter caused. We'll see the end of the story is coming soon in the Gemara. What happened? So, but Tzidkiya wasn't at fault at all. So this is not a good source for this concept. Elo, the Gemara says mehocha. There's a pasuk that says gam anoish l'tzadik loy toiv. There's a punishment for a tzaddik for the not good. What is this referring to? Ein loy toiv el ra. Loy toiv is ra. When a tzaddik causes somebody else something that's loy toiv, even if that person deserves it, it's ra, it's evil, and the Eibishter is then he's removed from the Eibishter's presence. Oksiv, the pasuk says, ki loy kel chofetz resha. The Eibishter does not want to be with wickedness. Ato lo yagurcha ra. You do not dwell together with evil. Tzaddik ata Hashem v'lo yagur b'mgurcha ra. The Eibishter does not want to dwell with evil. So this even refers to a tzaddik that brings about something that's not good in somebody else. The Eibishter does not want to dwell with him. This is the source. Now the Gemara comes back to the story of Nebuchadnezzar. And interestingly, the Gemara actually connects it to the lashon that it said in the Mishnah regarding a geidel. What do we call a geidel in our Mishnah? The geidel that the Kohanim made? Chaloshim. So the Gemara brings a pasuk where you find this term used by Nebuchadnezzar. My mashma the high chaloshim lishnu the purahu. What's the term chaloshim that it means a lot, a geidel? Chsiv, it says by Nebuchadnezzar, Eich nafalta mishamayim. The Eibishter says in Nebuchadnezzar, how did you fall down from your high place from heaven? He was a king that ruled over the whole world. How did you fall down? Hillel ben Shachar, he was shining in the morning. Nigdat al aretz, you were cut down all the way to the ground. Chaylish al goyim v'goyim, the one that threw lots upon goyim. So we see this term chaylish is used for a geidel. Now the Gemara says, what was the geidel that Nebuchadnezzar made? Omer Abba bar Avhuna, Malamid shahayamatul pur al gedoyle malchus. He would throw a lot on the kings that were under his rulership. Leida Eze ben Yoimei shal mishkav zchur. He would make these parties, and these different kings, he would have relations with them, mishkav zachar. That was a lot that Nebuchadnezzar was making. Uksiv, there's another pasuk that it says, Kol malchei goyim kulam. All of the kings of the world, the conclusion of that pasuk is, Shachvu b'kaved ish bebeisai. They were able to sleep in their house and in honor. Amar Rabbi Yechanan shenachu mimishkav zachar. After Nebuchadnezzar died, they didn't have to be exposed anymore to this mishkav zachar of Nebuchadnezzar. Amar Rabbi Yechanan kol yamav shaleisei rasha lenimtzis chayk b'pek kol beria. All the lifetime of this Rosh of Nebuchadnezzar, nobody could smile because he was such a terrible king that oppressed everybody. Shenema, Nechei, Nishakata, Nocha, Shakata, Kala Oretz, Patzchurina. After he died, so everybody calmed down, and Patzchurina, they all were able to sing. The Klal, Da'adashte lo yaverina. Until the point that he died, there was no singing, there was no happiness at all. You're not allowed to go and stand in that place of the palace where Nebuchadnezzar's palace was. The Seirim, the Shadim that are dancing there. So now here the Gemara brings the point that I mentioned before. What happened when Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do the same thing that he did to all the other kings when he seduced them into a relation with him, Mishkav Zachar? He wanted to do this to Tzidkiya. What happened? Nimshacha arlasai shloish meyes ama. The Eibishter extended his arla, the foreskin, 300 amas, the entire party he made. He got embarrassed by his arla being extended and going around the entire party. Shenema, the pasuk as we quoted before, savata kolain, that he became disgraced, mikovid, instead of having honor. Shesei gamata, you should drink as well, vehei adel, and you will become an adel. So that's how we read the pasuk. Not vehei adel, you became an adel. Adel, begematria shloish meis hava. The word adel is gematria 300, so that's the einish that he had, that is his arelus, his foreskin was extended 300 amas. The Eibush didn't allow him to do this to Tzidkiah. When the Nebuchadnezzar came to the Gehenim, there was a big commotion in Gehenim. Amru, they said, Shema limshal aleim uba. Is he coming to rule upon us over here in Gehenim as well? Or he's going to be weakened over here in Gehenim like us as well. Shenema, the pasuk says, Gamata chelesa kamainu. Are you coming to be weakened like us? Or eleinu nimshalta. Are you coming to rule on us? Yatas Abaska va'amra. So Abaska went out and said, Mimina amta. From who are you more beautiful? Redei v'hishachva esarelim. Go down and lie together with all the uncircumcised ones. Once he was in Gehenim, he had no rulership whatsoever. The pasuk says regarding the Nebuchadnezzar and the whole kingdom of Bavel, Eich Shavas Noiges. How did it seize the oppression of Bavel? Shafsa Medava, and it stopped Medava. The Gemara now will explain what this word Medava, Madheva. Madheva means the gold from Bavel. So the whole empire of Bavel, the whole Babylonian empire fell. Amar Rav Yuda, Amar Rav Shafsa Umazu. This empire, this nation has been seized from existence. Sha'amra, what kind of empire was it? This was an empire that would say, Madid Vahave. Measure money, measure your gold and silver, and bring it to us. They were so powerful that everyone would bring them gifts. Vikadamri, others say, Sha'amra, Ma'id Hevi. Whatever you have, everything, whatever you have, bring to us. Belay Midda, without any measurement whatsoever. So that's the word Madheva. Madheva is a combination of these two words, Midaid Vahave or Ma'id Hevi. That's how powerful they were, and they fell. This great empire fell. Another pasuk where it says about Nebuchadnezzar, Revu Yiseira Haisaftali, an added greatness you have given me. This is the story about Nebuchadnezzar. This is in Nevuah and Daniel, where they able to punish Nebuchadnezzar that for 7 years he had to live like an animal. And then after those 7 years, the Eibush brought him back to his kingdom. And it says that the Eibush gave him an added greatness. What was this added greatness? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Melamed sherochav alari. When he came back to his kingdom, he was riding on a lion, alari zachar, on a male lion. And v'koshar tanen beroishai, and he tied a snake to its head. Rashi says two interpretations what happened. Either he tied a snake to the lion's head and he used the snake as reins to ride on this lion, or he tied the snake to his own head. That's how powerful he was. That he was able to. That this was part of the nevuah there. That after he came back, he was able to rule even over the animals. L'kayim hashanema, to fulfill the Eibish's nevuah. V'gam eschayes asada nasati leilavdai. That the Eibusha gives that he will be able to rule even over the beasts in the land. That's the nevuah that was fulfilled regarding Nebuchadnezzar. Simon Matei. He was all to be able to rule, to be able to make the Churban Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara says that the Churban Beis Hamikdash should happen to a great individual. Shouldn't be destroyed by stam nobody. But it's all that it should come to such a great individual. Yeah. Okay. Simon B'Teiv. Okay.